Okay. So the last topic that we're going to talk about in today's webinar is kind of going through this idea of pacing system impedance versus shock system impedance. So as I mentioned, pacing system impedance is that subthreshold impulse that is being sent through the device to evaluate the actual pacing system itself. This is considered our low voltage measurement or low voltage impedance. Whereas a true shock system impedance measurement is going to be received or given to us by a device giving a shock. So we actually need the device to give us a shock in order to get a true shock system impedance. This is known as our high voltage. So when we're thinking about shock impedance, we have a variety of different devices that can deliver shocks. We have transvenous and we have our, um, our non-transvenous ICDs. But when we're thinking of normal ranges for this level of shock impedance that's given to us, the shock impedance here, again, think of this as shock impedance. We're not getting a true shock impedance. It's a low voltage shock impedance that we're getting. In this case, it's the shock system. Anyways, so normal range is there. Sorry, I was getting a little too deep and technical in my brain. But this shock impedance there, the normal range for these transvenous devices and for the Medtronic Aurora EV-ICD ranges from between 20 and 125 ohms. So this is completely dependent on, for transvenous devices specifically, how many coils the patient has. If it's a single coil lead, the impedance is more likely to be higher, on the higher end of that 20 to 125. Boston Scientific's system impedance is a little bit different. So that's why it's labeled down here differently. So for the SICD itself, you have your system impedance, and then you also have kind of your shock impedance, as I mentioned. So the system impedance is that low voltage impedance. This is the measurement that we can get through latitude or remote monitoring. And then in interrogations as well, we can get this system impedance. So anything under 200 ohms is going to be noted as normal. Anything from 201 to 400 would be caution, and you'll get an alert at anything greater than 400 ohms. So here you can see on this example that we have this system impedance of 70 ohms. And I like to show this example kind of comparing shock impedance to kind of just let us know that, or to kind of like put it into perspective that based on the amount of energy that we're delivering to get this impedance, our value is going to change a little bit because we're giving more energy if we're delivering an actual shock. So for the Boston Scientific SICD, a normal shock impedance is anything less than 200 ohms. Anything above 110, though, it would give you like a caution sign. But this is a patient where we can see the system impedance at 75 ohms, that low voltage impedance. After receiving a 10 joule shock, that impedance was around 70 ohms. And then during a DFT with a 65 joule shock, that impedance went to 59 ohms. So again, I just like to show this that, with more energy, your impedance is likely to change. Laura's going to walk us through looking at some shock impedance and kind of orienting ourselves to what we're looking at when we're looking at these numbers.
Yeah, for sure. So the thing that I wanted to point out on this slide is mostly the range of our trend, our graph that we're getting. So if you can see the little arrow where our measurements are between 50 and 90 on this graph. And every device company is a little bit different, and every device that you're looking at, the trends will look a little bit different. If this jumped up, then the range would obviously widen a bunch. And so being able to make sure you orient yourself to recognize like what it is you're actually reading will help a lot, because if you thought that this was a large range, then some of these jumps might, make you a little bit alarmed or something like that. But this is actually a very stable lead. And, like as we even look at the next slide that Alan's going to go over for us, like this is pretty much a straight line across like that next one is, even though when you zoom in, it might look alarming, but being able to recognize the range that we have given can definitely put it into perspective and show that this is a stable trend.
Yeah, definitely. I love the orient yourself to what you're looking at. So Alan's going to walk us through some issue that we might have, or when we might be concerned or not concerned with our shock impedance.
Yeah, so right away we have some Medtronic lead trends here, and We can see right away the RV defib impedance, as Laura was saying, it's relatively flat all the way across. So we like that. That looks good. We look at our SVC and we've got measurements greater than 200 ohms. Number one, these have been going on for a very long time. So right away, uh, I'm going to wonder, is this something that the clinic already knows about? We can see that lead warning occurred back in January of 2024. Um, the observations page is going to say lead warning. It's always good when we see that to dig in a little bit deeper and assess when did this lead warning actually occur, because it could be a very old observation that hasn't been cleared out. It could be a chronic problem and they were just interrogated in clinic. So while it cleared that alert when they were seen in the clinic, once they get home and get by the monitor, they might trip an alert again. But overall, on this patient, we can see that greater than 200 ohms. That's been going for a long time. It's consistent. Um, are we worried about this? Well, it's really important to know your patients, know what sort of system they have, know what sort of hardware they have. This patient has um, a single lead, single shock coil. They don't have an SVC coil. Um, so while we're getting values for the SVC impedance, that's a false finding. So very, very good. Are we concerned about lead integrity? No. We're more concerned that we know our patients, know what they have, so that we can discern if we see something like this. Is this an acute problem, or is this something that in this case is actually not a problem at all?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely good to do your homework on that. I appreciate that. The last example that we're going to go over today is this high voltage impedance, and I'll let Keith take the reins on this one.
Yeah, I like to end on this example here because we've been talking throughout the webinar about, does this affect the patient? What is the effect on the patient clinically? Functionally, are they going to feel any different? And it's a little bit different when we're talking about a high voltage lead impedance as opposed to a pacing lead impedance here. So in this example, we've had a fairly stable trend, and then recently we've had a couple of out of range measurements. And if this was a pacing lead, particularly one we weren't using, we may want to just keep an eye on it. But here, when we're talking about a tachy lead that could potentially be delivering life-saving therapy, we want to be a lot more conservative and careful, making sure that we're not missing anything that could affect that therapy. So anytime we have a high voltage lead, we want to be a little bit more careful and a little bit more conservative in taking action.